Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
How one organization wants to help reduce violent crime in Memphis. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Patrick Lawler, CEO of Youth Villages. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Along with Susan Deason, who is the Executive Director of Memphis Allies, a program that's been launched underneath Youth Villages that we'll talk a lot about today. Also here is Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. So you and I, we were just talking that you had previewed this program. Youth Village has been around for quite some time. We'll talk about the programs that you do as well that people are maybe more familiar with. But that with the spike in violent crime, that is both a national problem and very much a Memphis problem. What homicides up 30% over the last 2 years or last year, certainly up this year already. It's been a huge problem and a huge tragedy. And that you had told me that you all wanted to get involved and try to help. What was the process, and what was, briefly, and then we'll dive deep into it with you and with Susan, what was the process of getting there and your thoughts on what you all could do, given your background, to try and help with this problem?
Well, in the fall of 2020, the numbers just were spiking dramatically in Memphis on terms of murders and homicides. But also it was unique that year about the number of young people that were being killed throughout the year. And we said, what are we doing about this? We started looking at our own organization, and we weren't heavily involved in working with the most seriously delinquent and violent young people in the community. But so we started asking ourselves, what can we do more? But we started looking at the problem, and this is not a problem with children. 90% of the murders in our community are committed by adults, while often young people and children and juveniles get the headlines. They only represent about 10% of the people that are really involved in gun violence. So we asked ourselves, if we get heavily involved in just working with young people, really not going to have much of an impact on the overall problem in our community. And really just started looking at what others were doing in our community, what other cities were doing around the country, and felt that we could just do so much more.
Yeah. So you're heading up this program within Youth Villages. Give a snapshot of what you all are trying to do. I mean, I'll just some numbers that you want to hire over 300 staff. It's a $60 million program over 4 years, trying to reduce the homicide rate by 30% over that period of time. You also recently just got a big sort of out of the blue gift from Mackenzie Scott, who's been giving away billions of dollars nationally. Got a $25 million gift that will go to Youth Villages and maybe partly applied to this. And I think you've raised, 11 million plus before that towards this program. But is that all those numbers right? And two, tell people about the program and then we'll dive deeper into it.
Yes, and we're tremendously grateful for the donation. Complete surprise. We're thrilled. But this problem is going to take the whole community coming together to solve it. So where we are right now is in trying to understand who are all the other organizations in Memphis who can come together with us, that we can coordinate this effort. And so we've also begun building a new model that will help reduce gun violence. This is something we do have a track record of success for in building new evidence-based practices. So really exciting. We've hired new staff. There are 3 teams right now on the ground starting work in the Raleigh-Frazier community. We're working at this moment with 30 to 40 individuals that we're looking at to participate in service.
And again, and then I'll get Bill in here. Apologies to Bill. It's a very hands-on, very intensive program of trying to identify, and I'm going to do a bad job of this, but trying to identify kids or young people at risk, or young men, it's mostly men, maybe not just, maybe adults as well, because this is not just a youth program, and try to get them the counseling, the support, the wraparound services to not then go down the road of violence. Is that a fair way to describe this?
That's right. Many of them already are on that road, though. This is delivering services to those who are at highest risk currently. So that means they are currently in a gang, clique, or crew. They have had extensive legal involvement, likely not employed or in school. So there's specific criteria that identify someone as highest risk.
Okay, Bill.
One of the features of our city's ongoing discussion about violent crime is that I think we tend to say, okay, we have nonviolent offenders here, and we have violent offenders here. And people with day-to-day experience with this problem have all said it doesn't break down that way. You're not in one camp or the other. One camp can lead to the other. Is that your experience?
Yes, I mean most of the people involved in gun violence have been involved in crime for a very, very long time, probably many of most of their life.
Mm-hmm. And so is this intervention that we're talking about?
Yes,
With the sort of
it
life
is.
coaches. I mean, there's a great example in some of your stuff about, I think it's a fictitious person based on real circumstance of Marcus who is kind of on the edge in the way you're talking about this and has something happen in their life. I think it's a cousin is shot. I mean, it's the way these things get triggered, and maybe walk through that.
Yeah, there is a progression. Obviously, many of these adults who are at highest risk started off as at-risk or high-risk young people. So that's why we will continue developing services and expanding our services to work with those young people who are at highest risk. But when someone is exposed to violence at a young age and grows up in a community or in a family where that's normalized, they've been maybe in a gang at a younger age, this becomes day to day. And while that may seem strange to someone who's never come from an environment like that, it's normal for someone. And for many of these individuals, they don't know that there are other opportunities. They haven't been offered those other opportunities. And so it is intervention. It's the most intensive intervention that we've developed to date. It's new. We're just starting off. We know it's going to take time for it to be effective. That's why it's a 4-year plan for right now, but we want it to be sustainable. And to your point, it is a wraparound in that we have 4 different professionals who are providing services directly to each participant, and all of them work together as a team to provide the right kind of support.
Mm-hmm. So is this stopping retaliation? Is it getting to people at that level before they decide to try to even the score?
Yes, retaliatory violence is the most serious problem we have in our community right now with respect to violence.
And the key to this model is we've got to identify who those highest risk people are. That's the first part of this process. And in a city our size, the research is pretty clear across the country as well that it's probably about 300 to 500 individuals are involved in about probably 50 to 70% of the gun violence. And that's who we're looking for first to identify. Then we connect with them and then provide the necessary service. And this takes time. They don't, say they want to, get on board to be a participant the first time we talk with them. It'll take some time and some trusting relationships to be built.
Mm-hmm. Give me an idea, because Youth Villages has been involved in this. It's not like you just woke up one day and decided to get involved in this. So talk about some of the history of what Youth Villages has seen in this that informs this approach.
Yeah. People hear about Youth Villages and often think we're just a residential program out in the community. We served over 32,000 young people last year across 24 states in about 100 locations, and over 30,000 of those young people and young adults were living in the community. They weren't in a residential facility. So we have built 2 specific models that have tremendous data and research to support that they're very successful, and so we have experience working in the community with high-risk people up to the age of 22. Going above the age 22, that will be new to us. That would be new. But even though we work with young people up to the age of 22, we're still working with their parents and their grandparents and the adults in the community in the home. So doing community-based work we've been doing since 1994. So that's where most of our actual experience is. So we're building a model now that's working with young adults up to the age of 30, 35. And so that'll be somewhat different. And obviously the level of violence is different for us. But we've spent the last 1.5 years traveling the country, hiring the best national experts, building the most comprehensive plan we've seen to address this issue. And we believe with the staff we've hired and what we've learned over the past 1.5 years that we will be able to reduce gun violence. Other cities have done this using similar interventions and models, and so can we.
Mm-hmm. Part of Memphis Ally seems to be to also serve as a clearinghouse, because there are a lot of people doing a lot of different things And some of this is quite frankly based on just frustration. Like we have to say something, we have to try to do something. So this puts more of a focus on that, right?
Yes, I mean, we're building a new model that we will ourselves use and that we will also work with other organizations to help them implement. But we want everyone in this community who's invested in this, who's trying something, to be a part of this initiative. This is really about bringing everyone together and doing something effective.
Does that include the criminal, criminal justice system? So whether that's law enforcement, that's the jail, that's detention center, that's the courts?
Yes, it does. There are many stakeholders in the community that are involved in this in some way. So that's working with the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, working with law enforcement. Our services are separate from that. The intervention is separate from that, but identifying high-risk individuals and trying to ensure that everyone gets a chance who has that capacity for change.
You alluded to this, and I want to kind of pick up on that. Like you're not setting up a storefront, I don't think, and waiting for people to walk in. No. So the hard work of reaching these, and someone who is forced into a program as a alternative to going to jail or something like that's a different thing. I kind of see you shaking your head. You're trying to reach people in a much more organic way. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's often with people. A lot of the people you'll hire have some experience on the wrong side of these sorts of behaviors.
Yes, and they're critical to this process. That's what we're learning already, is that this wouldn't be successful without staff working on this who have that same lived experience, who've walked that path before. So they're much more likely to be able to engage someone who is on the wrong path currently than someone who has had no experience like that. So,
and one thing we've learned over the years, the last year and a half especially, is that, you know, I had the question as we visited other parts of the country where we learned about gun violence, why would someone want to, you know, change their life? And what we learned is that most of the people out there involved in this gun violence, they want out. They don't know how to get out. You know, the choice for them right now is kill or be killed or being arrested. And so we're offering them another alternative, a way out, and have a difference in the future of their life. But most of all of our staff have had a history of criminal activity that we've hired, because they're the ones that we're connecting with the people in the community that are involved in many of these gangs and crews. And it takes those kind of relationships, but those mostly men that we've hired working in this field, they become trusted mentors to these young people, these young adults. And that's really what starts moving them to thinking about having a different life. Hey, you were in prison, you're out, and you have a life now, you have a job, you have a family, and maybe that can happen to me as well. So that's the first part of this process.
So if in the course of this work you see something in the criminal justice system that would suggest that maybe that practice needs to change, what do you do with that?
You know, first of all, we're already working with the criminal justice system in relation to that, in terms of mental health. And we are offering some recommendations. We're working closely with Chief Davis and her team, and they're very, very open. You know, we did ride-alongs last year with the police department, and I will tell you, it was a wonderful experience. They have a very hard job. Those are very, very difficult jobs in very dangerous communities. And they want to do whatever they can to impact the community favorably, and have been very, very open to feedback from just early on in working with us. Yeah, and they've been wonderful to work with out in the community as well. They know where a lot of these high-risk people, they know a lot who these high-risk people are, and they know they need help.
Mm-hmm. Is it hard to talk to a victim of crime and say, you know, this person who did this to you, who violated you in whatever way, deserves a second chance, or we think a second chance could work for them? Is that a difficult discussion?
Well, we've had a few discussions with some victims, and you know, it's interesting you use the word second chance. I'm not sure a lot of these people in these communities have even had much of a first chance when you hear about their histories. You know, I'll let Susan. We had an event this past weekend where the parents of a child were there who had been killed, a young man named Rocky downtown a couple weeks ago. And it was a very difficult moment, but there were 150 or 200 people out showing how much they cared about this family. And you might want to talk more about your experience in talking to
Yeah,
families.
I was going to say, I think the answer to that's really complex. We are all impacted by gun violence in our community, but there are communities that are disproportionately impacted by that. So yes, we are trying to bring services to individuals who are engaging in violence, and we're trying to help those communities that are being torn apart by gun violence. That's something that we can, I believe, all get on board with. That's something that resonates with all of us, whether we've had a loved one directly affected by it or shot or killed, or whether it's someone who is engaging in it themselves because they didn't see another opportunity. And so I believe that we can come together to support victims as well as the perpetrators.
And just add this, look, many people involved in gun violence are not arrested. They're living in the communities, okay? And those are the people we're looking to help.
Well, I mean, that is interesting. I mean, isn't it something like 40% of homicides don't get solved? I mean, maybe 50%, depending on how you count it. It's a pretty high number that aren't solved, and there's a lot. I mean, you'll hear, I can think of Chief Rawlings, the former police chief, being on before saying, look, there's about a given incident, there's someone out there who knows who did this. There are people who can call us, and they don't call. Where are you all in that spectrum of information about people who haven't been arrested, who maybe are suspected? You're trying to intervene. I mean, how do you sort out the ethics and just the realities of that situation?
Well, we want to give that person that knows who someone is involved in this community in gun violence, they could contact us to help that person. Now, obviously, we're not involved in the police work and the investigative work and everything, but, if you know of someone who's been involved in gun violence, your choice now is to do nothing or call the police. And we're hoping now that maybe they would call us and say this person might need some help or some support or some supervision. Now, we won't get involved in, obviously, the legal part of that.
You mentioned touring the country, looking at other programs. Where were some of the places you went, and what were some of the things that you saw?
New York, D.C., Chicago, Oakland, and Stockton, California. Chicago had a program called Chicago Cred, tremendous organization, started by a man named Arnie Duncan. And one of the first things we asked is, Arnie, how did you get these organizations to do this work? He said, I went to a bunch of youth-serving organizations and asked them to work with older people. This is exactly what we're doing here. This is where we learned how to develop this model. The model is called Switch. We developed our own model. Our model is built specifically for Memphis. It's much more intensive than the other models we saw and much larger than other programs we saw because we have such a large problem. But they told us we've had hundreds of hours of training by Chicago Cred already. Matter of fact, they were here just a few weeks ago. We've had 2 visits to Chicago to learn about their, and people say, well, Chicago, our murder rate is almost twice as high as Chicago and Memphis. And they've been doing this a lot longer in a coordinated effort as well.
And that's murder rate per 100,000,
per
right?
capita. Per 100,000, that's right.
It's per capita. Yeah, and we're top 3, top 2 when you look at it that way. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to add to that a critical part of this is working with people who live in these communities. So that means organizations who have already been doing this grassroots work on the ground and bringing them into our effort because they have the credibility in their communities. Most of the people don't look like me. And so we need to hire staff who look like the people that we're delivering services to, and we want to make sure that the organizations here in Memphis who know they have a wealth of knowledge about this problem, they care about their communities, and we want to come together and provide them support and resources to help their effort.
The 2 things that we learned the most traveling around the country was, one, this has to be a priority for everyone in this community. Government, business, the nonprofit sector, everyone, this has to be our priority. And secondly, it's going to take all of us working together to solve this. It's got to be a collaborative effort where we're working closely together and connecting the dots. And that's why it's not just about youth villages, that's why it's Memphis Allies. We're working with many other not-for-profits already, and we'll be expanding it broadly throughout the next few years.
Bill.
Does this include legislation? Because as you may know, a lot of our criminal justice system leaders think that the legislature made this problem worse by doing two things. Number one, passing a bill that said you can have a gun in your car, and the other was that they passed a law that eliminated the need to have a permit to carry certain types of weapons. So is that a factor in this?
You know, we've had a gun violence problem here long before that legislation passed. Okay, you know, there's some people in this community that probably don't need a gun. Okay, we're not involved in the legislation, but we do. We are not advocates for people who are dangerous for having weapons. That's not something we would support whatsoever. But we've pretty much stayed out of the legislative process.
Memphis Allies will support safety when it comes to gun ownership. We want responsible gun ownership, and we'll continue to promote that.
Going back, and we've probably done a disservice to people who aren't as familiar with youth villages. You talk about, if I'd had you on the show 2 years ago, probably should have. If I'd had you, what does youth villages do?
We care for seriously emotionally troubled young people, primarily in the child welfare system, about 25% in the juvenile justice system, or people in danger of coming into those systems. We have 3,300 staff across 24 states. We primarily work with the highest risk young people in danger of being removed from their families, put in the child welfare system. And then if they are placed in the child welfare juvenile justice, try to return them back to their families. We also have residential programs. We have 2 large programs here in Memphis. We have one in Douglasville, Georgia for the highest needs young people. And we also provide therapeutic foster care across Tennessee as well. But I guess our most broad program across the country is called LifeSet for young people aging out of the child welfare system. That's serving young people 17 to 22 years of age.
That are no longer eligible for foster care or homes?
They're out of the, well, they could be in the aging out part of the foster care system, but yeah, most of them are leaving the foster care system and trying to live independently.
How at risk people who've gone through the traumas that you're talking about and then are aging out, which is a sad thing to say, but they're aging out, how at risk are they of falling into crime? I mean, is that part of what you've dealt with this for decades, apparently?
Right.
I mean,
sure, very
because
high risk.
that high risk situation.
And many of them have been involved in crime.
Yeah.
I mean, often a young person's been in the child welfare system, but they've probably been involved in juvenile court many times, but the judge just made the decision to put them in the child welfare system rather than the juvenile justice system. So.
Yeah. So a similar question, Bill had my question, which was about legislation, but if you just look at policies, you mentioned the juvenile justice system, or you talked about working with Chief Davis, the head, police chief of Memphis Police Department. How much will you advocate for changes in policies that various parts of the criminal justice system have, the courts, again, there's the laws that are set, that's one thing, but then there's the kind of implementation and so on. Will you try to sort of advocate for the criminal justice system operating differently, or does that get too political and get out too far?
I think we've already had some conversations about possibly us having a greater impact of working with young people with mental health issues with the police department. No, we'll be heavily involved in that. I see us much more involved in that than we would necessarily be involved in legislative issues in Nashville. Yes.
You're nodding. I mean, do you find that the criminal justice, again, I'm saying it as if it's a system. I think all the shows we've done, I've said this a bunch of times, especially through the fall, we did a lot of shows on, the sheriff, the DA, mayor talking almost exclusively about crime and so on. That it isn't a system. It's a series of sort of islands often that don't necessarily work as well together as they would all like to work. But fundamentally, do you find that the justice system, again, back to my probably useless phrase, is receptive to these kinds of diversions and alternatives and so on?
Yes, I do. I mean, we've already had preliminary conversations about how could we create diversion programs that would feed into our new intervention. So I think they're incredibly open to it. I think it is incredibly complicated. It's a huge system, and you're right, sometimes there are communication breakdowns, but I think that's where we could also facilitate some good change.
Whether it's with Memphis Allies or your history of working with kids that are at risk or have a criminal background, I mean, how often do you run into people, whether they are, whether it's a cop or it's a prosecutor or it's just a person, who maybe you're a nonprofit, you're going to people for support, who says, these kids need to go to jail. That's the answer. They need to have, they need to be taught a lesson. They need to be removed from society. I mean, people who really just want to lock up. How often do you run into that, and how do you respond to them?
Sure, we run into that, often, and some young people need to be removed for safety reasons and put in a juvenile facility or residential treatment facility. But the real work needs to be done when you return them back to the community. What are you really going to change in that community? Young people, for that matter, all of us are a reflection of who we're with and what those people are doing. And if you don't change the community and the environment, the family circumstances, situation they return back into, there's not going to be much change by just taking them away and putting them in an institution for 6 months or a year. As a matter of fact, they may come out worse. So that's why in all of our programs, we work intensely with the family while the young person may be in our foster care residential program to try to return them safely back to the community and make sure that there's things have changed in their world, whether it's school, whether it's job, whether it's the family dynamics, or even where they're living. But that has to be, that's where the real work comes.
With 15 seconds left, and how bad has COVID been? And the lockdowns and the separations and the kids not in school in person?
It's been terrible. It's been terrible. I mean, our own organization, families couldn't come visit their children in residential programs. Kids could not go home visit their families from residential programs. They couldn't go off the campus. It's terrible.
Yeah. All right. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for joining us. If you missed any of the show, you can get the full show at WKNO.org. You can also search for the show on YouTube, or you can get the podcast of the show on the Daily Memphian site, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks very much, and we will see you next week.